What's up, everyone? Shane Santacroce here as always. We're going to make it happen today with Jason Taub, South Florida Realtor. We got some fun stuff to talk about today, and we're going to hop right into it. So welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started.
Sure, Shane. So thanks so much for having me. Native South Floridian, born in Hollywood, Florida, and raised in Cooper City. So went to Cooper City High School, went to UCF, University of Central Florida in Orlando.
Okay.
Came right back afterwards. Lived in Davie for 4 years. Actually, I rented in Davie for 4 years. I'll tell you about that story if you'd like to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ended up eventually buying a condo in Fort Lauderdale.
Tell me about UCF. Let's talk about some early days, right? So I'm very familiar with UCF. I worked with a lot of players over there, helped them kind of start their careers in the NFL and some other things that we've done. And, that campus for me has always been a very interesting campus. Offers a lot of things that other schools don't necessarily offer. Not knocking UF over here, so don't worry. She's a big UF girl over here, so she's not a big fan of UCF. But it's actually one of my favorite campuses. When I took my daughter to look at different colleges throughout the state, for whatever reason, like that campus specifically, there was just something about it, like the vibe, the connection with the people, just everything about it, and they were offering mental health counseling for freshmen, which I thought was amazing. And it was the only school, maybe other schools do it, but it was the only school that actually touched on it and really explained why and the pressures that kids have coming into school as a freshman in college and all the stuff that comes along with it. So I found that really interesting. Tell me a couple of things that you really liked or enjoyed about UCF.
Yeah, so funny you ask. So toured the campus for the first time, never toured another campus. That was the one college campus I toured. That was it. No, I wanted to be there. I loved how everything was just centrally located, right? So
yes.
The campus was built out in a way where, they really thought it through. So everything was, in a circle.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You had the student union in the center. Everything kind of spanned out from there.
Yeah.
So getting around campus, navigating it was super easy. Right.
And very safe too. I mean, that's one thing I noticed about the campus too is that they have all these stations where God forbid something was to happen. Like you always had somewhere to go and someone to reach out to. And as a parent bringing my kid there, that especially a girl, right? That really, really was what I was like. Wow, this is something special.
Every state campus has that, by the way. It's the little buttons. Every couple feet, you have to have the emergency buttons.
Those blue lights.
Yep.
I'm the same one. Once I toured UCF, I'm like, I don't really think you want to go anywhere else. Let's stick it here. And my daughter felt the same way. She did see a few other campuses, but of course, COVID hit, and it was a whole big mess after that. We're not going to get to that right now. But I love the Knights. I was at their championship game when they played in the Fiesta Bowl, and had a couple players, shout out. But still talk to a few of them to this day. So, all right. So outside of school, South Florida native, Cooper City, Hollywood. I mean, South Florida is a very interesting place, and I've lived all over the place. Family from New York. I used to go back and forth. I've traveled all over the world, and there's just nothing quite like South Florida. Right? So, I mean, you've been here, you haven't left. What are some of the things that you find interesting or, tell me about the opportunities that South Florida brings you.
Yeah, so when you look at South Florida as a whole, specifically Fort Lauderdale, right? So I've lived in downtown Fort Lauderdale for 13 years.
Okay.
Going on 14. So I've seen Fort Lauderdale transform even over the last 5 to 10 years. It's crazy what's been happening even in the downtown area alone.
Absolutely.
Monday through Friday, 10 years ago during the week, after 5 p.m. it was a ghost town. Now after 5 p.m. it's a bustling city.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And when you talk about, if you look at the skyline now compared to 10 years ago, there were several high rises. Now, I mean, you look at the skyline and you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. So when I was in the mortgage business many, many moons ago, right before the big, 2008 mess, my office was in the Wachovia building on Las Olas, which it's not the Wachovia building anymore, but back then it was.
Yep.
My office was on the 19th floor and it was overlooking the ocean. I could see the ocean. I could see Intercoastal. I mean, it was amazing views. And now there's just so many buildings around that. None of that was there back then. I mean, you're right. Like, the landscape in Fort Lauderdale has changed drastically over the past, 5, 10, and 15 years. So it's definitely a good time. The nightlife is there now. I think they've made it where Miami used to be similar. Miami's now come basically just a party life, right? Sorry, guys, maybe Brickell's a little bit different, but for the most part, if you're moving to Miami, it's very, tight and congested, a lot of walking, kind of like a typical city type environment. I think Fort Lauderdale still gives you that. You can have a nice residence, and if you want to drive somewhere, it's not going to take you, 45 minutes to go, half a mile. So it's a little bit different, and there's always something going on, which I think is really, really good. So let's talk about a couple of things. Right now the market is very different than it's been, I think, all throughout history. Every 20 years we have some kind of weird shift. Right now we're dealing with COVID. Before we had 9/11. Before that we go on and on for the 80s, the 60s, etc. But we had obviously a massive market shift. We had all kinds of people moving in, and now the big fear of the big market crash that's coming. Personally, I don't see that happening. It's not anywhere near what it was in the 08. It shouldn't be compared to that crash. We were giving away money, liar loans, no income, no docs, no nothing. Just say you made the money, we'll give you a house. So people were getting into mortgages that they just couldn't afford. Now people can afford those homes, right? So I wanted to get your opinion on the market, where it is today, and kind of what you see coming next.
So the news, right? Everywhere you look, recession. We've been talking, the news has been talking about that for, I don't know, maybe 6 months now. And they say it's coming.
Maybe even longer, since March.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. So, depending on, which news outlet you watch, right? The recession's already been here. Some of us are saying the recession is coming. At the end of the day, it's scaring people. So when you watch the news, they talk about a market crash, a recession, right? When you look at all of the industry reporters, top executives of the big banks, they're all talking doom and gloom. Okay. Maybe in certain parts of the country, real estate prices will be dropping. A crash like 2007, 2008, like you mentioned, I agree with you. I don't think so. It's not going to happen. It's a totally different landscape now. South Florida is way different than most of the country. Everybody in the world is looking for real estate here. Yep. Everybody in the world. So South Florida was already on the map. Everybody always wanted to be in South Florida.
Yeah, can't build new waterfront.
Exactly. Then COVID came, and everybody went, wait a second, I can work from home, from the pool, from the beach, from the boat.
Yep.
Wi-Fi, right? So, that really put South Florida on the map. Okay, and, some folks, after a while, they decided, okay, you know what, I'm going back to, the Northeast. I'm going back out west. But a lot of folks said, I'm not going back.
Yeah.
So, when you talk about the market crash in South Florida, I don't see how that's going to happen. It's simple economics, right? High demand, low inventory, and the low inventory is, like you said, you can't build more waterfront homes.
Yeah, and a lot of the people that came in from the Northeast or the West, they came here during COVID, and they wanted to get away from whatever restrictions they had. Obviously, Florida had, not getting political, but a lot less restrictions in most places. You guys can argue amongst yourselves or in the comments about why or whatnot. That's on you. But ultimately, that's just reality. So people were coming here, and South Florida became expensive. You had all this money pouring in South Florida, and people in South Florida started moving north as well, in areas like Tampa and St. Pete, Plant City and Ocala, that whole corridor between Tampa and Orlando. I talk about this all the time. And those areas are booming right now, and a lot of people don't realize that. So South Florida became now, all the way up to like the Tampa corridor and all the way down, we've had this booming market. So, I don't see it being this massive crash. I don't think it's possible to have a massive crash in Florida. And I don't really keep up with other states as much as I used to right now, but I just don't see that happening because the people that bought those homes can afford those homes now. Now, we will have some people leaving. There's a mass shortage of inventory in general throughout the country as it is. So if you have to uproot and go somewhere, why not? Why not a place like South Florida? You kind of have a melting pot here of different people, different opportunities. You can literally go out one night and sit at a bar and meet people from 10 different countries. Right? It really is an amazing place. I love it. I've been all over the place. A lot of you guys have heard me talk about it before. I've traveled everywhere, and I just would never leave South Florida. I think the opportunities here, what it brings, of course, the weather and all that. It's only getting better day by day. I think it's becoming more expensive. I think we are kind of pushing away the opportunity to live under middle class here. So I think that we're going to get to a point sooner than later that if you're not in the middle to upper middle class, you're just not going to afford to be living in South Florida. You're going to get pushed up to the, the Palm Bays and the Melbournes and the Plant Cities and those other areas just because it's going to be too expensive to live here.
Yeah.
And that's what we're kind of seeing right now. So,
and when you talk about, prices going down, right? So let's talk about specifically South Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Prices may go down slightly, but when you compare, the early 2000s, 2010, 15, 2020, 21, 22, prices go down a few percentage points now. That we're still, that's not the crash that people have been talking about and waiting for.
Yeah.
Right? You're still better off if you're on the fence, continuing to rent versus purchasing. At the end of the day, you're still better off purchasing. I'll give you a perfect example. So I rented for 4 years in Davie many years ago shortly thereafter graduating from UCF. And the renewal notice for the apartment that I was living in came, and at that point, now we talk about 10 to 20% rental increases, right?
Yeah.
Then it was probably no more than a couple percentage points, but
probably 3 to 5, right?
Yeah,
It was still something.
it was something. So I started doing the math, and I'm adding up. Okay, I've been living here for 4 years. I'm renting for this much a month. Oh my God, that could have been a nice down payment on the purchase of a home.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that was my tipping point where I said, okay, you know what? Now I'm going to purchase. And so I purchased about 13 years ago. And when you look at the value of the property when I purchased it 13 years ago and where I am now, and time flies.
You can't lose. I mean, and that's the thing with real estate. Look, if you're looking to get into a property, fix and flip and all that, yes, there's a strategic play behind that. You have to know what you're doing. You have to pay attention to market. If you're looking to get in and out of a property in 6 months, how much you really expect to make. There's a lot of, math that goes into that, a lot of research that goes into that. But if you're looking to buy a home to live in, if you're going to be there for 10 years plus, you're not going to lose.
Exactly.
I'm not going to say it's impossible, right? But it is almost impossible. When you look at the market over the past, let's say 100 years even, every high is higher than the last high, and every low is higher than the last low. And it's going to continue. Nothing just goes straight up, right?
Exactly.
It's just up like this, but you always end up. And, I think this pandemic should be a real lesson that people understand that when things go bad, right, people need certain things. They need food, they need water, they need shelter, period.
Yep.
So shelter is going to be one of those things that has value no matter what. And there's a lot of other investments we could talk about, but at the end of the day, if you want to make a solid investment into your future and your kids, if that's your thing, real estate's absolutely the way to go. So I agree with you on that 100%.
Exactly.
So let's talk a little bit about, Peak. You've got to work with us a little bit. I think you're starting the process now of our website design that we offer. You've come to our events. Let's talk about the events. Tell me your take on the events so far. What do you really like about them? If you want to talk about what you don't like about them, we can talk about that too. But what do you really like about them, and what do you feel you've gained from them?
Yeah, so great question. So I've been to a ton of networking events, right? Cross industries. The Peak Title events are actually networking events, right? So I've met a lot of professionals across industries, right? So normally these networking events you go to, it's the same industry. Everybody does the same thing. They have a very similar, position. Peak Title events are different in the sense that you guys really bring together the whole community from a business networking perspective, which I think is really different. And I've really appreciated that because I've met, mortgage bankers, lenders, title. I've met folks not even in the real estate industry. I've have some very good yachting contacts now.
Oh, nice.
Flight charters, yacht captains.